Assalamualaikum, everybody. Ahmed Susi here, your Civil Rights Director for CAIR Arizona, and I am excited for today because we are continuing our Black History Month speaker series, and we have a great guest with us. But before we get to that, let me introduce my co-host, Sister Tartil. How are you doing today?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Tartil Al-Imam, and I'm the Executive Administrator here at CAIR Arizona. And this is a continuation of our Black History Month series, where we'll be highlighting different leaders and activists and artists and Black people within the community that are just doing phenomenal work, and we wanted to shed light on that. And so I'm excited that today we are here with Imam Dawud Walid, and I will be giving a brief introduction, and if you would like to add anything else after that, please feel free to. So Dawud Walid is currently the Executive Director of the Michigan chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR Michigan, member of the Imam Council of Michigan, and Senior Fellow at Auburn Seminary based in New York. He previously served as Imam at Masjid Wali Muhammad in Detroit and the Bosnian American Islamic Center in Hampton, Michigan. Is the author of the books Fatwa and Raising Males into Sacred Manhood, Blackness and Islam towards the Blackness and towards Sacred Activism, co-author of the book centering Black narrative, Black Muslim nobles among the early pious Muslims and centering Black narratives, debate, Blackness in Africa, and author of the foreword in the book The Spirits of Black Oak. So if there's anything else that you would like to add on to that, Brother Dawud, please go for it.
That's kind of a little formal stuff. So that's a couple of fun facts for the audience who don't know. Number one, I used to play football, including my first year in undergrad, but all through middle school, high school, up into college. I actually was recruited for football. I was redshirted.
What position?
Those guys were too big, and I was strong safety. Those guys were hitting. They were hitting too hard and were too big. So I figured I needed to read books and get out of the football game. That's number one. And then also, I did serve 4 years in the U.S. Navy, and I got out under honorable conditions. But that's kind of a mixed bag, but I am a veteran. So those are two things.
Nice. Well, I'll tell you what, when we do the inter-squad CAIR football team, I'm definitely going to have to get you on our squad. So, you know, I don't know if it's going to be West versus East or North versus South, but you're going to be repping on CAIR Arizona's team.
For that to happen. So we'll just get right into it. Today will be around just in Islam and speaking on what it is to be a Muslim Black activist fighting against injustices, both in today's world and outer communities, as well as just tackling anti-Blackness within the Muslim community. So first question, I guess on my part that I would want to ask for you is, you've been in different spaces where you're present as intersectional identities, being a Black man, being a Muslim man. How is it maneuvering these spaces, and what advice do you give to young activists that are trying to maneuver these spaces?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. So, you know, regarding that question about, you know, being Black and being a Muslim in spaces, you know, I've always tried to center things and look at things that my racial background and my culture is an important part of myself, but I don't make it my qibla, right? So it's part of my lived experience, it's part of my lineage, but my number one priority is my devotion to Islam and my striving to be a better person, because at the end of the day, what's all said and done, my Blackness is not going to give me a card to Jannah, right? It's Iman in deeds, and how I try to live a life that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In saying that, I would say in the Muslim community, probably in America, and this might be a controversial statement. I'll even go even further in the broader society. I would say the most marginalized person in American society is probably a Black woman who's Muslim, who's muhajjaba, right? So in saying that, I know that there's a level of leeway that I get as far as being a man, that on top of having certain assumptions that have been made about me, and things that are done overtly and covertly because I'm African American, I am well aware that if I was a woman, that I would probably be subjected to more disrespect. So I try to keep that in mind, especially when I hear people, kind of like saying stereotypical things or trying to generalize about Black women. That's something that really would cause me to stand up and be more vocal than if it were just an individual slight against myself.
Thank you for, and something that you said that aspect of, like you mentioned, having the intersectionality of being Black, Muslim, visibly woman. I think that's something that a lot of times when I show up to spaces, I don't mean to make it an identity, but people on the outside are quick to perceive you externally. And so I really love said about how you don't make it your, like, this isn't something that you want to lead you in all things that you do. But I feel like a lot of times it's harder because it's not you that's pushing the narrative of this is my idea and this is how I'm entering the spaces, but it's rather that someone on the outside will see and automatically be like, oh, this is a Black man or this is a Muslim woman. We'll just sort of already create this perception, perceive you to be.
Yeah. You're breaking up a little bit in what you're saying.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
You're better
I don't
now.
know.
You're better now.
I don't
know. I think you could ask it again.
Okay.
I couldn't even hear the last part that you said. So,
okay, so yeah, I was saying a lot of times on the outside.
It's even worse now.
I'll go while we fix that technology issues. For me, Brother Dawud, one of the things that more of a just like a question of advice as someone who is an executive director at a Muslim organization, but like we were also talking about a Black man in America. I feel like when stuff happens, as civil rights activists, we're usually called upon to talk about how this impacts our community. And sometimes it can get tiring, right? And sometimes we don't have the expertise, especially as the younger person like me. I can't speak about everything, but there's always that call that as the one Muslim they know to come and speak. For you, I guess, how do you handle navigating both what happens in the Muslim community, but also what happens to the Black community as well? So,
well, what I would say is that I actually strive to be empathetic towards those who actually are outside of my community. Like I basically have a pulse, like on the African American community who are Muslim, because that's where I'm from. That's my background. That's what I came up in. And I'll just give you an example in regards to why I say that, because Black is Black, but all Black ain't Black American. So what I mean by that is that, like in my community, like Metro Detroit is the most concentrated area of Muslims per capita in America. We about 100 masajid, but like our population is nowhere as high in a metropolitan area like Southern California per se. So like we have a masjid that's almost exclusively of Senegalese immigrants. We have two Islamic centers in our area where a majority Nigerians are from the Yoruba tribe, right? We have a group of people of one masjid that are a mix of West Africans, predominantly Fulani tribe and Mandinka tribe. Right? And then we have another center where the sheikh is Mandinka, that's Gambian. So my point of me saying that is that there is something that people look at as us being Muslim and maybe phenotypically seen as non-white, but my experience and what I go through in the Muslim community is not the same as a Sudanese American or a Somali American. Yeah. It's just not. Like, even like our Islam gets questioned even more. Like, there's a certain authenticity that when people come from lands that speak Arabic, even though they're Black, they carry a different authenticity to many people in the Muslim community than African Americans. That's why I say all Black ain't Black, though it's Black, if you understand what I'm saying. So
100%,
when I go to communities and things happen, I try to empathize with them, because a reverse situation may happen. So like Detroit is 80% African-American. It's the most African-American major city in America, right? So my people who are African-American and who aren't Muslim in particular will look at these immigrant groups of Black people, but don't see them as our people, right? Mm-hmm. Which could even cause or incidences of anti-Muslim bigotry that come from African Americans against Muslims who are from West Africa. So it's complex, but what I try to do is I try to place myself in the shoes and empathize with the group if I'm going to a particular community, and to try to get how they feel. And this means as Dr. Sherman Jackson says, that hard work is the hard work. So I've spent a lot of time over the years of just going, praying in different masajid, just having sohbah with brothers and talking to brothers and sisters in groups when I can, sitting down, eating food, and just getting to like learn about different aspects of the Muslim community. So that's how I try to navigate this like very diverse community that we have here of Muslims in Michigan, Southeastern Michigan in particular.
Well, those are two great points. I mean, the first one is empathy. I think, that's definitely the key to a more understanding society. Just realizing, like you said, that, there's so much that we don't know. But like the second part is the way to solve that is actually uncovering and breaking bread with people, having a conversation. And a lot of times, it's just that whatever I see on Twitter is going to be my thought of what these people are. So those are definitely two good points. I don't know if you're still having technical issues or.
By the way, I got off of social media, my personal accounts, about a year ago. I call it anti-social media now. I've literally like divested any like energy from being part of that, because I don't find it to be fruitful at all. But we have our CAIR Michigan account, and when I go and speak, then different organizations will advertise on social media. But I'm like, nah, I got out of that.
That's going to be the age divide. We young people, we need the retweets. So, but I definitely can understand how, it makes me feel some type of way sometimes when I go on Twitter. I'm like, I can't handle this today.
Yeah, it's not the real world. So
definitely. It's mostly spoilers.
I think, are you able to hear me properly now? Hopefully my connection is not. Yes. Okay. I think a point that you made that like really hit home with me is the aspect of blackness not being something that can really be defined in one square. Even within the quote unquote Black community, like you said, there's a diasporic community. Within Africa, there is the countries, and that's like each country defines for its own way. So I think for me, as a Sudanese Black Muslim woman who immigrated to the US at the young, coming to terms with what does Blackness mean was something that I really personally, it was challenging for me, because to be Black in Sudan is one thing, it's understood as one way, and then moving to the US and suddenly there's a lot of layers that I didn't have to think of before. And so I guess my question, or sort of to hear your thoughts on, a lot of times within Muslim communities, we have amongst the youth who want to be in space where they want to understand more the deen, they want to gain more knowledge about it, and they want to be able to do so in a way where they are gaining this knowledge and benefit students in other organizations. However, from my personal experience, what I saw is a lot of times there is this idea that, again, people from towns like majority Arab countries worthy in a sense of in religious spaces or learn religion or being seen as worthy of being a part of these conversations. And that's just sadly the truth. I've experienced a lot in college. I've experienced it in organizations that I've been in. So what would be your advice to young Black Muslims that are seeking that aspect of being immersed in an Islamic environment and finding how to become leaders within their community?
You were kind of breaking up. I don't know if you heard that.
Yeah, I think I got the question. So like there's a balance that I think we should try to strike, right? And especially being in Islamic spaces and especially when learning. So on the one hand, we don't want to be in spaces which would be what I would consider to be hostile spaces, right? Like religiously hostile spaces where our very presence, like we don't feel that we are welcome because people are making overt comments, you know, about, or to the extent that we are being shunned, like in a congregation or a jama'ah, right? On the other hand, to be a proper Muslim, is being in community, right? And you know, the Sahaba, which is the best generation, when we read the Sirah and read different stories, they had challenges, right? They had issues where Sahaba had problems getting married because of their tribe and even like their skin color. There were issues where old tribal rivalries flared up, like between Beni Aus and Beni Khazraj, right? And there had to be some sort of reconciliation and bringing people together where people, like, we don't have the option to check out of the community. Like, I don't like this whole idea of the community is ruined and there's no so-called like safe space in the community, so I have to like disengage myself from the community. And it's one thing if there's like some physical abuse or sexual abuse took place against a person. It's another thing where it could border on self-righteousness, right? That, you know, that I'm this and I'm that, as if I'm better than the community. No, we have to be part of the community and to make things better. And this also includes, you know, learning sacred knowledge. The second point about this is that I don't think that it is our general position that we're not supposed to look for imara or look for leadership. We prepare ourselves, and when those who are in positions of authority or the community itself see someone worthy of having that trust, then they should be given that trust. I'm not the one that says that people should seek to be leaders. As a matter of fact, this is actually against our Islamic framework, and we know the well-known hadith of Abu Dharr, and he's one of the greatest Sahaba. He asked to be an emir or a leader of Muslims in a particular situation, and the Prophet ﷺ, you know, told him no, right? And this has been taken like as a proof. The third thing is relating to that, like we should qualify ourselves to be in positions of leadership. And I would say that one of the mistakes that I've seen in the community is that a lot of times we get fired up about social justice issues or things going on in society, but how we view certain issues and the means that we go about to addressing them is based more in feelings, not in ilm. And when I mean ilm, I mean that our religion, our deen, gives us the sacred parameters of how far we can go and how far we can't go. And that's the litmus test, or that's the like we have something called objective truth, right? And anything that discounts Allah and his messenger or is not based in metaphysical realities, there's something problematic in that epistemology or that framework of how to judge what is truth, right? So we have to have that religious grounding, and like just being fired up and wanting to like change things, that's not enough. And in fact, one seeking to do that can actually collect sins for themselves by advocating for issues in the wrong way or advocating for wrong issues in the name of social justice. And so I think that this is probably the biggest challenge that I see in the community in regards to activism circles.
That's definitely a good point. Because one of the things I tell people why to work for CAIR is you get to uh, defend and empower and educate the Muslim community, and a lot of that is selling the that tapping into that emotional, like, I want to be there. There's a lot of Islamophobia happening. I want to stop it. So I guess what advice do you have to say, I guess, to be more analytical, I guess, in it, or allow your dean, or just wanting to stop, because with how rampant Islamophobia is, I feel like there is that initial, I'm upset and I want to do something about it. But I guess what would your advice be to take that next step and do it in a better way?
Okay. So obviously I work for CAIR Michigan. I'm involved in anti-bigotry work. So I have to reiterate that before making this comment that may sound a little counterintuitive, but let me give you some more background about myself, right? So like, both of my parents are African-American. Half of my family is Muslim, half is Christian, okay? My parents grew up in the civil rights era. My mother went to Jim Crow segregated schools. My family comes from a day and time where literally there would be raids in the city of Detroit where Muslims would go and try to pray, who were African-American, and would get arrested, right, by the Detroit police. Okay. My grandfather was a sharecropper, basically a legalized slave. How he got out of South Carolina is he lied about his age to join the US Navy during World War II, right? Wow. So I'm saying all that to say, we do have an anti-Muslim bigotry problem in America, but I don't think that we should skip steps in actually learning our deen and getting like proper spiritual mentorship and guidance as if we are in like imminent danger. Like we are not facing the threat of lynching and physical violence like how my parents,
that's a good
or
point.
my grandparents, we just aren't. And even in the worst after 9/11, it never reached that point. Muslims, for just being Muslim, don't get beat up and get lynched by the police just because of religion. If you're Black, it happens, right? But so I'm saying is that we have to take a step back, and we have real problems. We have the Islamophobia network in which hundreds of $millions are used to try to smear our religion and try to marginalize us socially, politically, no doubt. But it's not an issue of we have like this imminent threat that we're about to be, that we can't pray in masajid anymore, that we can't like send our children to Islamic schools, that sisters can't wear hijab at work. I mean, Muslim sisters get harassed, but we have people serving in the U.S. military wearing hijab, right? So my point is that we have to take the proper work and prerequisites, which is to study our deen properly. And Imam Ahmad Rafai, I'll say this, he's one of the great scholars of Islamic spirituality. He's a descendant of Sayyidina Hussein, Ridwanullahi alayhi. He makes a comment that says, whoever does not have a sheikh, then his or her sheikh is shaitan, right? So this is a statement, this is an exaggerated statement, right? But what he's conveying in the statement is that for our own guidance and for us to help ourselves with our own egos, if we don't go about the business of having spiritual mentorship and having a sheikh or a sheikha to help guide us so that we stay in the parameters of Islamic ethics and the sacred law, and to help us and humble ourselves by submitting ourselves to a teacher. I don't mean blind following, but like to humble our nafs, our ego. Then what will happen is we will confer to ourselves, and anyone who is conferring to themselves as their own guide is going to be tricked by the shaitan. And as I was taught, if the main person you go to for advice is your own thinking, then you're seeking advisement from a fool. right? So
Yeah.
that's sorry for the long drawn out answer, but we really have to, I believe, and this is why I wrote my book Towards Sacred Activism. I think that on some things that we do as a community, that we need to really hit the pause button and really go back and reevaluate, like, what have we been doing, or why have we been not advancing as a community in a healthy way in certain ways? Like, what are the reasons behind that, right?
That's a good point. Our work that we do is so vital to the community that I agree 100% that we have to, reanalyze ourselves. Like you said, this has been going on, Islamophobia before 9/11, right? So, it's not a new thing. And sometimes when you let emotion, like you said, take the wheel, you find yourself going in a wrong way. So I definitely can see what you're saying. That's maybe I got to get off Twitter, because Twitter will make you go too emotional. But
yeah, and just adding on to that, it's like Twitter and social media is an echo chamber, and you have a small amount of people who will regurgitate or retweet or share certain things, and if you're not careful, you could take this exaggerated echo chamber as actual reality of how it goes, like moving around society, right? So I think if anyone who's an activist stays on it, it should be used strategically, but like open up your heart and your mind to actually seek out news and engage people who disagree with you. Number one.
Definitely.
But that's number one. And then number two, to stay away from taking what people tell you as as absolute facts that you see on social media, because you align with someone's politics, right? That's a problem in and of itself. And the third thing is to stay away from activist debates and arguments on social media, because it doesn't solve anything, and it ends up it stops being about the truth, and it's one nefs fighting against another nefs. It's not about, it stops being about the truth. It's an ego battling other egos, and your ego ain't your amigo.
I like that. I'm gonna steal that one.
Su ego es no su amigo. I didn't make that up, by the way.
Well, you're the first person I heard it from, so you'll have it here for today. Tatu, did you have any other questions there?
Yeah, this is something that you touched on. I want to delve a little bit more into it. How can we reframe fighting anti-blackness as Muslims' obligation rather than the burden of to carry in spaces?
Okay, so this has many realms. I say, firstly, for Muslims who are Black, we have to remember the Prophet ﷺ said, "Likulli da'in dawa," for every disease there's a cure. And when we suffer racism or feel like, rightly or wrongly, like sometimes we can exaggerate things, to feel like we're under siege from our own community, from anti-Blackness, this can cause trauma and deal to some spiritual issues that we have ourselves. And that in itself needs spiritual remedies, right? So there's remedies for the mazlum, or excuse me, there's remedies for the person who's been harmed, and then there's a remedy for the zalim, or for the one that's doing wrong, right? The other thing is that we are told in the Quran about the importance of ta'aruf. Like this is a divine framework that our Lord has given us in the Quran of getting to know one another, right? And this is not something that's optional, it's a spiritual obligation for Muslims. So this involves not just reading books or listening to speakers, but this also relates to one taking the time, the sweat equity of leaving the comfort of one's home or one's community to go sit and have organic conversations and interactions with other people who don't look like you. Then from this, hopefully the spiritual quality of ta'atuf for empathy grows. And then you have the moral obligation, as the Prophet ﷺ said, in narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri in Sahih Muslim, rahmatullah alayh, by Imam Muslim, rahmatullah alayh, he says that if you see a munkar, that you change it biyadi, right? If you see an injustice or a wrong, you change it with your hand, meaning if you have the authority. Doesn't mean smacking somebody upside their head. Oh, you racist, right? Doesn't mean that. But if you can't do that, then you try to resist it bilisani, meaning you have a moral obligation to speak out against it. And then the Prophet alayhi afsalam said, but if you don't do that, then he said, at least resist it in your heart. But then he said, well, dhalika adaful iman, but that's the weakest of faith, that's weak, right? Like, so we have to really see this issue of anti-Black racism in the community, that when we see people being racist against other Muslims, and we sit back and don't challenge people in our group, that in fact, we are doing spiritual harm to ourselves by being silent. It's literally an issue of iman is what I'm saying. It's not just some sort of social political issue of like, oh, we gotta speak truth to power and Black Lives Matter. No, it's literally an issue. It's a spiritual issue, right? And it's affecting our own hearts and our own souls when we don't do what the Prophet ﷺ instructed us to do. And racism is from the munkarat. There's no doubt about it. It's from the munkarat. It's from those despicable things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loathes and finds disgusting.
Wow, I'm just taking in what you said, because I think this is the first time that I hear it being reframed as a spiritual issue than just, like you said, quote unquote, social justice issue. And that's just so powerful, just hearing that.
Yeah, well, let me say this too, and this goes for everything that we do, right? So the Prophet ﷺ said, Inna li kulli shayin haqiqa, that for every created thing, there's a deeper reality, there's a metaphysical reality. So I say this all the time, and I was taught this, that behind all physical manifestations are metaphysical realities. So anything we see wrong in society, know that there are spiritual diseases underneath that. And laws in court cases can't solve spiritual diseases because it's an issue in the heart. Like advocating for laws and better policies in the broader society in our community, they're needed, right? Adjudication is needed. But remember, the Quran, of the ayat of Quran, is only 10% ahkam, meaning 90% of the Quran has nothing to do with laws and rules, right? So these are spiritual issues. So just as Hadith Jibril says, we have Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, right? We can deal with things intellectually and deal with law, but if we're not dealing with the issues of the hearts, right, then at the end of the day, we're not going to even erode cultural racism, much less things that are systemic in the broader society or in our community. So again, I think we have to reevaluate how we go about this work when we talk about being against racism, being against Islamophobia. I think that as activists and organizers must talk about organizing around better public policies and, and to make sure that there are good judges that will, adjudicate matters properly. But, at the end of the day, without dealing with the hearts and the spiritual diseases, then really we're just putting Band-Aids that will continue to get ripped off over and over and over and over. Just like my parents and my grandparents were marching for voting rights, and we got voting rights in 1965 as Black people, and they've been steadily pulling off the Band-Aid and trying to take away voting rights for African Americans since then. They just use different tricks and different tactics, right? So the racism never got out of those people's hearts, right? They just camouflage it differently and you use different language, right? Instead of calling us the N-word, just say it's urban. You feel me, right? So we have to look at this issue a little differently than just looking at things on the surface. We have to dig deeper. And
that's true change. And I definitely echo that what you mean about our work is not, you're right. I mean, as the attorney for CAIR, yeah, I'm trying to win cases, but that's, like you said, a Band-Aid. True change, we need to be better at that. And I think sometimes, even with us as people who work in the civil rights movement, you're right, that we can get a little blindsided a little bit, that we're right, hey, we're already doing this work, we're doing good. But to really get that true change, you have to take a step back, reflect, and see, are you actually making that human to human impact, and not how many likes does our social media post have. So I definitely like that. Changes in the heart. I'm stealing that one too.
And the first change is with the work on changing our own hearts. And we always in the movement here come up, we got to hold people accountable. But the first accountability, the muhasabah, is holding ourselves accountable, right? Definitely. And so if we're not doing that, if we're not trying to embody being more spiritual people who are inclined to being more kind, being more fair, then then a lot of it just ends up becoming performative, right? In what we're doing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran when he says, do you call people to be pious and just, but you forget it for yourselves, yet you recite the book, don't you have any sense? Right? It's like, so I think that the equation is that it's not even 50-50. We have to spend more time working on ourselves. And then at the same time, then that work on ourselves, that we help in promoting an environment where our spiritual states, our ahwal, is influencing others that we come in contact with, right? And this is the prophetic methodology of Al-Habib al-Mustafa sallallahu alaihi
wasallam. One thing, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it, Ahmed.
The one thing that is definitely important, just as Black History Month is, we usually use this month to look at the past, but also look at, leaders today. But even though we're at the end, I definitely think it's important that we as a community, like you said, reflect on past civil rights leaders and see how, marching the streets works to make attention, but like you said, it starts with ourselves. So for me, I think we as a community need to, use the whole year or multiple years for that self-reflection, and not just, look back for, Black History Month or next month with, Women's History Month. So yeah, I think self-reflection is huge and something that should be easier, right? We always talk about trying to reach people. You're yourself. You should be able to reach yourself pretty easy. So I definitely like that.
I know. First, thank you. I've been reflecting a lot on what you've been saying, and it reminds me of something similar to what Sheikh Mikael Smith talks about in terms of emotional intelligence, and how there's parts of it. It's not just how you interact with others and how you communicate with people around you, but it's also, there's rather the interpersonal aspect of it, where it's how can you regulate your emotions, how present are you with yourself, and intentional are you really with own thoughts and action, so that then you can project that same presence and intentionality with those around you. And subhanAllah, like something that you said clicked is, I think a lot of times when we're in spaces that are focused on activism and social justice, it's very easy to separate it from Islam's teaching and to feel like these are concepts only present in non-religious spaces. And I think the one thing that I always try to ground myself in is knowing that of these theories and a lot of things that are spoken about in, whether it's an organization and like these books that are becoming like bestseller, is that these are not new concepts. And I think you grounded me in fact in that Islam itself really lays the foundation, the groundwork for how to be a compassionate and just and fair human. And so this work really doesn't stray far from practicing our daily prayers or giving zakat. Like it should be as instrumental, as important to our identity as Muslims as we give every other act of worship.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I say this all the time, that instead of trying to make Islam conform to our politics or our activism, our politics and our activism needs to conform to Islam. And the path to tawfiq is doing things for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we strive to be sincere and take sacred means, and we leave the outcome with God. In other words, we are not the ultimate determiners of outcomes. And as we're told in the Quran, that we may love a thing that's bad for us, and we may loathe a thing that long term later on is good for us, right? But we're not all knowing, we're not all wise. So sometimes we may think that we can just sidestep and take an easier, softer way, or this activism of conforming to the sunnah is not getting us to where we need to get to quick enough. So then we want to take another path or another way, or adopt another worldview that that we don't know, that even if it may grant us a short-term success, we think may lead to the long-term detriment of our community, but even more importantly, like our own selves. So I just say that for the viewing audience again, that instead of trying to conform Islam to our politics or our activism, we need to be conforming our politics and our activism to Islam.
100%, 100%. There's going to be, there's Muslims before us. There's going to be Muslims after us, inshallah. So, I definitely, I understand sometimes in this work, like you said, you feel like, you got to do everything, because if you don't, then, bad things will happen. But you got, even in the time of the Prophet, right? Those were the Muslims who were, like you said, being attacked and killed for practicing their faith. So, and I mean, even not to, shortchange what's happening in other countries, stuff like that. We are blessed to have the, religious freedom, and to really make that change, you got to start at the heart. So I appreciate everything you said, Brother Dawud. Before we close up, did you have anything you want to say or last remarks?
Well, I guess my final remark would be that Black History Month, which started off as Black History Week, started by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, is a very important endeavor. And there are certain times where we need to give certain aspects more attention. I mean, this is good, and this is, I think it's praiseworthy, it's noteworthy. But what I would also say is that there is no authentic history outside of Black history. So when we look at what goes on in America now, socially or politically, and how we're going to move forward, make progress, having any sort of analysis outside of Black history, outside of the enslaved Africans, about 30% of them Muslim, how they helped build this country, lead it into being a world economic power, into the Industrial Revolution. The civil rights that all Americans benefit from today, that came from off of our bodies being strange fruit hanging from trees. If that's not factored in one's analysis, then one doesn't understand American history properly, and one can't really move forward properly in this land, divorced from that history, right? So I would say that February is an important month. We can learn about Black history, but any analysis regarding where we're at and how we're moving forward, divorcing Black history from it is highly deficient.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Tartia, did you have anything before, or?
It was beautifully said. I think it really leaves with that aspect of to be intentional about now that we are taking more into account what we learned, and so that it's not just a set one-off time thing that is then isolated from the rest of our work and the work that we do. And I think you just a beautiful way in terms of intentionality and doing the work to reflect as much goodness and empathy. Thank you so much for such a beautiful conversation. I know definitely going to go back and listen, because the whole time there were so many that I'm writing the whole time, just like I sit down and write so many things. So honestly, we're so honored and have you here with us, and we thank you so much.
Welcome. Inshallah, I'll have a chance to go down to Arizona and check you all out one day. I haven't been down there probably in about 7 years. Inshallah, I'll make it back there one day.
Inshallah, we'll see you at our banquet too, you know?
Inshallah, if you ever come to Michigan, we can go out for halal Philly cheesesteak sandwiches in Dearborn or something like that.
Sounds good with me.
Have to make that happen.
Thank you so much, Brother Dawud. And thank you all for watching. Obviously, you should be following CAIR Arizona, but if you're not, follow us. Follow CAIR Michigan too, but stay off social media, you know, don't be on it too much. But thank you guys so much. Masalama.
Okay.